A mother is being choked to the brink of suffocation under the hands of a brutal thug. And right up on the second floor, her young daughter stands there with a shotgun gripped tightly in her hands. She could easily take down the man tormenting her mother with a single shot, yet the girl keeps hesitating and never pulls the trigger, then quietly lowers the gun. She stares down at the scene below with a chilling, delighted gleam in her eyes. And in that very moment, when her mother's eyes plead desperately for help, the daughter just stands and watches, wondering what she'll have for dinner tonight with the father she loves most. It was all slipping far beyond her control. Back in the early 80s, bringing the Electra complex, a daughter obsessed with her own father, onto the screen in such a direct and twisted way was an incredibly bold move. The film is recognized as one of the works that dared to cross the ordinary moral boundaries of its time, to dig deep into the warped psychology of a sociopathic teenage girl, laying the groundwork for the later archetype of the demon wearing an innocent face. The film is drenched in a suffocating, oppressive atmosphere, so much so that even the python the mother fears and keeps her distance from is something the father, Robert, unconditionally allows, giving in to Julie's every demand. He never once cared about his wife's feelings, showing a boundless favoritism year after year. It slowly nurtured the selfishness and cruelty festering in Julie's soul. The mother, Irene, had long recognized her daughter's twisted nature. More than once, she seriously urged her husband to discipline Julie strictly enough to correct her in time. But Robert was lost in his daughter's clingy affection. Savoring the satisfying feeling of being so desperately needed by his child. Shielded and protected by her doting father, Julie grew more and more out of control and stopped respecting anyone in the house. She even turned the python into a tool to get back at her mother. She deliberately used the very thing Irene feared to threaten and taunt her daughter. The prolonged emotional oppression, along with the constant conflicts inside the family, left Irene drained both physically and mentally. She simply couldn't endure this warped, suffocating family atmosphere any longer. But this proposal she made, for her daughter's own good, was overheard by Julie, who was hiding on the stairs. And in her warped mind, her mother wanting to send her away meant wanting to steal her father's favoritism away from her. The next day, she deliberately skipped school to stay home, clinging to Robert and begging him sweetly. She bluntly told him she never wanted to leave and only wanted to stay by his side forever. Robert was completely lost in his daughter's clinging affection. Without a moment's hesitation, he agreed to his daughter's plea. He never realized that his own boundless indulgence was quietly planting the deadly seed of the tragedy to come. And that very afternoon, a hulking new worker at the grocery store named Weston brought utter ruin down on this already fractured family. Irene, while her husband was away at work, wanted to get rid of the threat once and for all, so she asked the strong Weston to carry the python from her daughter's room out to the field and release it. But Weston turned out to be a vile man, lingering long after the job was done and refusing to leave, his eyes shamelessly fixed on the beautiful Irene. Seeing no one else around, he started forcing himself on Irene. Irene, terrified, shoved him away with all her strength. But that very act struck a nerve in Weston's fragile pride. He swung his arm in fury and struck Irene hard across the face. He brutally dragged her along and beat her mercilessly. At this point, only the mother and daughter were home, and Julie heard her mother's desperate cries for help. She immediately grabbed the shotgun and ran out, the weapon clutched tightly in her hands. She stood silently on the second floor, the barrel aimed straight at the back of Weston's head. The distance was point blank, and one pull of the trigger would have saved her mother. But the instant her finger was about to squeeze, a dark thought suddenly took root and sprouted inside her. If her mother were gone, then her father would belong entirely to her alone. Her selfish possessiveness overpowered the last shred of humanity left in her. She chose to lower the gun and coldly watched as the brute tormented her own mother. Afterward, she even deliberately hid herself away and let Weston walk off unharmed. It wasn't until Robert got off work that the father and daughter went to the police station to report it. Facing the police chief's questioning, Julie didn't so much as flinch, lying that she'd been in her room the whole time and only came out to find her mother already killed. As for how the crime unfolded, she claimed to know nothing at all. Out of a lenient bias toward an underage girl, the police chief didn't dig too deep and simply ruled it a break-in homicide, then let the father and daughter go home. Back home, Robert sank deep into the grief of losing his wife, his mood spiraling into darkness. Julie, on the other hand, showed not a trace of feeling for someone who just lost her mother. Instead, she quickly took over every matter in the house, playing the role of the woman of the home. Though doubt stirred inside Robert, he still couldn't bring himself to question his daughter's unnatural coldness. When night fell, Julie took out a pair of scissors and cut her mother's image out of their family photos. In the album, she kept only the frames of herself and her father. She erased every trace of her mother's existence, then changed into a tight, clinging nightgown. Robert didn't think much of it, assuming his daughter simply felt insecure after the tragedy. He calmly accepted his daughter's clinging, and she was convinced that with her mother gone, she'd have all of her father's love to herself. But those peaceful days didn't last, and just a few days later, Robert brought home a new girlfriend. It was Susan, and she came along with her 8-year-old son. Only now did Julie realize that her father had never been faithful in love. Even while her mother was still alive, he had secretly developed feelings for Susan. The sudden appearance of these two strangers left the fiercely possessive Julie deeply resentful. Throughout the meal, she said not a word, deliberately creating an awkward, suffocating atmosphere, openly making her rejection clear. Gentle and simple-hearted, Susan mistakenly assumed Julie was just struggling to accept the family's upheaval, that she simply couldn't adjust to new family yet, so she deliberately took Robert and her son off to another room. Gently reaching out to Julie, she sincerely said she had no intention of replacing her mother and only hoped they could live together in harmony. But faced with this heartfelt, earnest stepmother, Julie just rolled her eyes in contempt, quietly stood up, and walked away. Utterly unmoved, late that night she happened to see her father tenderly lulling Susan's son to sleep. The favoritism that once belonged to her alone was now shared with an outsider, and violent jealousy swallowed her reason whole. She glared at the sleeping boy, murderous intent surging in her eyes, and only after a long while did she reluctantly suppress the vicious urge inside her. That night, Julie again accidentally caught her father and Susan being intimate together. That glaring sight filled her with resentment and twisted her completely. She would absolutely never allow anyone to steal her father away. A vicious plan of revenge slowly took shape in her mind, one meant to lower Susan's guard. Julie deliberately pretended to be sweet and well-behaved, going out of her way to play with the boy and putting on a fake show of harmony. Susan saw the change in her with her own eyes and let her guard down completely. Without hesitation, she agreed to let Julie watch the boy alone while the couple went out. Julie lured the boy into climbing inside a broken, discarded refrigerator. She heartlessly slammed the refrigerator door shut, ignoring the child's heart-wrenching screams for help. In that sealed space, the freezing cold slowly drained the boy's strength away. She waited until the child's cries for help grew fainter, and then fell completely silent. Judging that enough time had passed, Julie ran off into the woods, pretending to play hide-and-seek, waiting for Robert and Susan to come back. She even deliberately stalled, stammering vaguely and hiding the boy's whereabouts, driving Susan half mad with worry. In the end, she found her son unconscious inside the refrigerator. Seeing her plan exposed, Julie panicked inside, afraid the boy would turn her in once he woke. She quietly slipped into his room and threatened the boy with a vicious glare. The child, already scared out of his wits, dared even less to tell his mother the truth. But the small, strange look on her son's face still caught Susan's attention. She pressed Julie for answers, but Julie deliberately dodged her. After giving a few vague, unrelated answers, she turned her back and walked straight off. But deep down, Julie knew full well that Susan had begun to suspect her. The time she had left to make her move was running short. And right then, fate once again handed her a chance to do evil. While riding the elevator, Julie unexpectedly ran into Weston, the thug who had killed her mother. A normal person coming face to face with their mother's killer would surely recoil in fear. But Julie wasn't the least bit afraid. If anything, she was a little thrilled. She quietly followed Weston to pin down exactly where he lived. Then she used a payphone to arrange a meeting at a busy, crowded shopping mall. A crowded public place would keep her safe. This was the safeguard Julie chose for herself. Once they met, she flatly admitted that she was the girl who had stood frozen like a statue the day of the crime. Weston was utterly stunned, but what he found even harder to believe was that Julie hadn't come to avenge her mother, but rather to make him an offer to eliminate her stepmother, Susan. Julie used the threat of exposing his murder as leverage against him. She firmly forced Weston to obey her orders and go through with taking out Susan. Weston had no choice but to take on this dangerous job. Night fell, and following Julie's directions, Weston slipped into the villa through the unlocked back door. He cautiously swept through the entire house, confirming that everyone inside had been deliberately led away by Julie. And right now, there really wasn't a single soul left in the house. Now, all he had to do was quietly wait for Susan to come home. But Weston had no idea that Julie was already waiting with a shotgun, hidden deep inside a wardrobe. From the very start, she had never intended to spare this thug. It was a scheme to use someone else's hands to kill, then silence him too, killing two birds with one stone. She had planned it so tightly that not a single gap was left. And just a few minutes later, Susan came home from work. Julie had already cut the power in the house beforehand, so in the pitch-dark stairwell, Susan had to light a candle and slowly make her way upstairs. A phone call checking in on her had her distracted. Out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly caught a large foot poking out from behind the piano. In a panic, she threw down the phone and turned to flee back downstairs. Weston lunged out fast and cut off her escape, and the two of them grappled in a fierce struggle. Outmatched in strength, Susan simply couldn't break free, and in the end, Weston shoved her down. Upstairs suddenly fell quiet again, and Julie stepped out slowly, cradling the shotgun, ready to quietly finish Weston off. But the sound of her chambering around gave away her position. Weston instantly snapped to alert, hurled a liquor bottle, then charged straight at her and knocked the shotgun away. He shoved Julie hard, sending her tumbling to the floor. And in that critical moment, Julie dropped her fake, fragile facade. Her eyes turned cold and ruthless, and timing it just right, she drove a hard blow into Weston's vulnerable spot. Weston buckled to the ground, crippled by the pain and completely unable to move. Julie, her face utterly blank, picked up the shotgun and finished this thug off for good. She had carried out her killing plan to perfection, 2 birds with 1 stone. Looking at the wreckage before her, she broke into a satisfied smile. Just as she thought it was all over, footsteps suddenly sounded outside the house. Julie assumed her father was home, so without any caution, she walked over and opened the door. A cold dagger suddenly plunged straight into her chest. Red instantly spread across her shirt, and in the very moment she collapsed, Julie finally saw clearly that the one holding the knife was Susan, the one who was supposed to be dead. It turned out that after Susan fell from the window, she had been faking unconsciousness the entire time. She had quietly waited for the moment to strike back because she had long seen through Julie's hypocritical mask. She understood all too well that inside this girl lay a hidden, deadly cruelty. A woman capable of forcing her way into someone else's family to become the other woman, like Susan, was never the gentle, weak kind of person who'd let anyone push her around. Hidden within her, too, was a quiet weariness and a ruthless strength. And in the film's final stretch, Robert returns home. He sees the crime scene left in ruins everywhere, with Susan cradling the barely breathing Julie in her arms. She deliberately staged a false scene, one where both of them had been attacked by thugs. With no leftover evidence and no third party to witness it, this whole chain of killings was ultimately ruled nothing more than an unexpected attack. While Julie plotted every kind of scheme, staging one massacre after another, she schemed to seize her father's favoritism all for herself. But in the end, she died inside her own scheming. The most suffocating thing about this film was never the bloody scenes of killing, but the dark side of human nature that hit so close to real life. Julie's evil was never something she was born with, but rather by boundless, limitless indulgence. And an unbalanced family dynamic nurtured little by little, step by step. The father's favoritism, blurring every boundary, warped the very way his child saw the world. It fed her own extreme possessiveness, leading her to disregard human life and do evil as she pleased. Because every bit of unprincipled favoritism and indulgence will, in the end, come back around to devour the very one who planted its seed. leaving behind a tragedy beyond any hope of saving. And perhaps the most terrifying thing in this film lies not in the cold blade that ended Julie, but in the fact that the very father she loved most was the one who, step by step, turned a child into a monster, while to the very end, he never realized it at all.